Okay, so we are going to now turn to a conversation with three Tennesseans. And I think you all know, those of you who are here who are from Tennessee, that we are proud as a state of the natural resources that we have in Tennessee. We are proud of the beauty of our state. We are proud that things like agriculture are part of our state's, an important part of our state's economy. And all of these issues connect with issues related to the environment that students learn in. We also know that storytelling is part of our state's heritage as well. And so for this conversation, we're going to hear from three Tennessee leaders, whose work is really sitting at the intersection of education and the natural resources that we have in Tennessee. So I'm really excited to be joined by Chelsea Carpenter, who is the Executive Director of FFA, Mike Butler, who is the CEO of the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, and Michelle Goodson, who is the Director of the Oak Ridge Associated University's STEM Accelerator. And I think we might just start by asking each of you to give us a minute or two about who you are, what you do, and then I'll jump into some questions. And Chelsea, let's start with you.
Absolutely. So I am Chelsea Carpenter, the Executive Director of the Tennessee FFA Foundation. I'm new to this role. I stepped into this position in December of 2024. But I'm not new to FFA. So 10 years ago, I was a student in Tennessee that got elected to be the Tennessee FFA state president. So I served that year, my senior year of high school, freshman year of college, and then went on to work for Farm Credit Mid-America. I worked in the ag lending space, spent some time at Purdue University working with their honors college and leadership development. All of those pieces coming very strongly from my experience in FFA and ag education. So when the opportunity to come home was presented, it felt like there couldn't be a more worthwhile cause than to come back and work for the nonprofit that supports Tennessee FFA.
Great. All right. Next, Mike.
I'm Mike Butler, Chief Executive Officer for the Tennessee Wildlife Federation, and I'm an old dog. I've been in this business now for 29 years. I've been the CEO since '02. And I grew up in Jackson, Tennessee. My training, I'm a classically trained wildlife biologist. My research was on waterfowl in Montana. It's a tough place to work. It's horrible. Don't go there. And came back home after that and really got recruited to the Wildlife Federation in 1996 and stuck around long enough that just made it kind of happen. And one of the things that I think back about is, why am I in this business? Outside of growing up in a house where we spent a lot of time hunting and fishing and outdoors, scouting was a big part of who I was growing up. And there was one particular incident where, if you're familiar with scouting, there's a thing called the Order of the Arrow. And they make you do a trial, and they stick you out in the middle of the woods with a tarp when you're 15 years old, and you have to spend 24 hours in total silence. And what came out of that, and what has come out of a lot of other outdoor experiences, is that teaching of self-reliance and character. You know, you learn what your character is when you're by yourself and you're faced with all kinds of challenges. And so I think the outdoors is a great teacher.
Yeah, great.
And it teaches wonderful lessons that help us grow up and do important things.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Michelle?
Good morning, or good afternoon, everybody. I'm Michelle Goodson with ORAU. I lead the ORAU STEM Accelerator, which is really the intersection of education and the nuclear industry right now. We're trying to close the gap between the workforce supply and demand by helping educate the next generation of workers in the nuclear industry. And we are excited to tell you that there is a nuclear renaissance. It's here, and it's alive and well in East Tennessee. And then it's coming across the state. It'll be here soon to Nashville and then Memphis as well, as we see data centers and other intensive energy necessary lifestyle choices being made. We're going to need reliable energy sources, and nuclear is that solution. It's one of many that will work, but it's that reliable, stable energy source that can be a base load for our utility companies. And so we're excited about that, but we're also concerned that we haven't gotten the workforce prepared yet for the needs that we see coming, or even the needs we have today. So we're really at that critical juncture of creating the right environment for our students to be able to understand what opportunities are out there for them that can change the trajectory of their life, give them stable work for their whole life, really, and create a financial opportunity for growth and future development. So I'm excited about that. I grew up in a family of educators. My grandmother was an educator. My mother was an educator. My father was in the nuclear industry as an engineer. So I understand where these come together very well. It's very personal for me. Also grew up right at the base of the mountains in East Tennessee. So the Smokies are my home, and I love that, and I never want to see that go away. So we have to have creative solutions in how we get to stable energy for all these wonderful lifestyle things we want. We want iPhones, and we want to have AI and all this cool quantum computing, but it doesn't come free. It comes at a cost, and we have to figure out how to solution that. So we've got to get that workforce ready for that.
All right. So first kind of question I want to ask each of you, and Chelsea, I'll start with you again. You know, as we all talked about, I think Tennessee's natural environment shapes not only our economy as a state and the way of life that we have as Tennesseans, but also I think how we see ourselves as Tennesseans. I mean, I think you each gave examples of how the place that you are from in the state and the natural environment around that place has impacted your life outlook. And so to start, I'd like you to each share your story, what drives your work, what drives your passion in the work that you're doing, and how Tennessee's land, water, natural spaces have influenced both your personal journey and interests, and also your professional mission. And how do those experiences factor into the work that you're doing every day? And Chelsea, I'll ask you to start, and might also ask, as you're giving your answer to this question, for those who may not know, also tell us a little bit about what FFA is too, as you talk about your journey too.
Absolutely. So I grew up in rural Wilson County, so in an agricultural community. And so when I went into high school, I was offered the opportunity to take agri-science as a science course. And so I took that path because I was interested in where my food, fiber, and shelter came from, right? That was something that was a cultural feeling for me because it's the community that I grew up in. So FFA is the organization that is a part of agricultural education. It's a part of a three-circle model. So FFA, classroom/laboratory experience, and then supervised agricultural experiences. So that would mean that every student that is in an ag education course is an FFA member, and they have a project that they work on that they're passionate about. That project can lead them down several pathways. They can be recognized and awarded through proficiency awards. They can also turn those into agri-science fair projects, and I know I'll get a chance to talk a little bit about that later. So when I think about my experience, I think Nicole spoke to this when we were having a conversation earlier in planning about education being opportunity. And so that step into that agri-science class was a huge door that opened for the rest of my life and career to this point. And so the skills that I learned being an FFA member, serving on the leadership team, led me to receiving scholarships to college. They opened that door. And then they led me to opportunities to study abroad, to see agriculture in other communities across the world. So I was lucky to be able to travel to the Netherlands and see robotic dairy systems. I was glad to be able to go to Costa Rica and see what a pineapple operation looks like, and different practices that are in place. And then finally, I spent a semester in Greece and really was immersed in agriculture across the country. And so those experiences all brought me back to thinking that agriculture is culture, right? It is our food that we eat. It's the meals that you see in communities. It's the clothes that you wear, the style of clothes that you wear. And it's the roof over your head, right? It's the facility that you live in. So I am just very thankful for my time in the organization. And it's my experience in agriculture and how important it is to guard the resources of land, of water, in our communities. So
great. All right, Mike, how did your story, your experience with Tennessee's natural resources impact your personal interests in your professional journey?
Well, I kind of gave away a little bit of the prize on the first answer, but chasing waterfowl all over West Tennessee, I was just enamored. There's something about birds that is, if you've been around them up close and personal, it's very inspiring. And so that led to the passion to go study them. And that's one thing that I'd say about if you get outdoors, if you're a hunter or an angler, it's a little bit of a different experience where you have to immerse yourself in that setting to learn the behavior of the animals you're pursuing, to understand the natural systems. It's just a little bit different of an activity. So when I went to school, and I went to Montana State for grad school, spent a lot of time by myself in a pickup truck driving across the state about 20 times a year. And that's a lot of road miles to study ducks. And one of the things that was going on back in that day, and that would have been 93, policy in wildlife and natural resources was not a mature industry at that time. It's much more mature now. It's a professional industry. It wasn't that way then, but I got hooked early and got to kind of focus in on that. And what endeared me to policy work around wildlife was that it's the highest leverage work you can do. You can take, any of us have been doing this, you can take a couple $100,000, $300,000 and leverage that into tens of millions of dollars, whether they be state or federal, to achieve and target and solve giant problems that we have. I mean, if you look back, just in our country, hunters and anglers contribute about $4 billion, somewhere in that neighborhood, in excise taxes on the sale of hunting and fishing equipment that fund on-the-ground conservation in every state of the country. And so we'll get a little bit more into that, I guess, later. But the idea is that, government isn't really great at coming up with creative solutions to problems. That's why they have SCORE. That's why they have the Wildlife Federation. A lot of these creative ideas come from the private sector, and specifically the nonprofit think tank private sector, right? But government is the place to take it to scale, to where you really see the impacts. And so when you see things like the Clean Water Act, and you see things like the Clean Air Act, and you see things even more recent here in Tennessee, like the Municipal Solid Waste Act in the 90s, you can look 10, 20 years down the road and see that impact and say, this really worked. So that is what drove a lot of my passion, was to say, you can be the little engine that could and really have a significant impact on the backside if you work hard.
Yeah. And okay, Michelle, you talked to us a little bit earlier about where you grew up and having the Smokies in your backyard. Talk to us a little bit more about how your experiences with Tennessee's natural resources impacted you personally, and then the professional work that you're doing right now.
Sure. So a little bit more about my background. I grew up in a modest family. We didn't have a lot of money. I lived on what you would consider the wrong side of the tracks, in probably one of the worst elementary schools in the county. And my mom was an educator who drove to the other side of the county to teach. So I didn't even have her in my school. So that did kind of set the stage for education is important, but you don't have all the resources. So it's kind of that interesting, I guess, dichotomy of what we have still today, unfortunately. We can't say that we fixed all of those under-resourced opportunities. And so that was one interesting aspect of my life. My dad did go into the nuclear energy field, which created stability for our family and brought us through the ranks and created that opportunity for me to go on to a four-year degree at the University of Tennessee and to really fall in love with working in the human resource field. So I'm passionate about making sure that kids are well educated and that they have career opportunities that they're proud of, and that they can get those opportunities in front of them early so that they're aware of them and they're not locked out of things. I'll tell you, it was very frustrating to me to be in one of those less fortunate schools and not to be able to get the math class that I wanted in middle school, so that when I got to high school, I could then go into Algebra 1. I couldn't go into Algebra 1 immediately because it was excluded from my curriculum in middle school. So that was frustrating. And I don't want that to happen to other young ladies or gentlemen who just don't know that that can set them up for a great career in a math program or a science program. And so that was a little bit frustrating. But I also grew up on with my mother who lived on she lived on a farm. So my first couple of years of my life were living at my grandparents' house, and I was eating peas out of the garden. So I have an appreciation for agriculture and the way we get our food, and the fact that being back to nature and having that educational knowledge of how we get all of those wonderful life resources and getting out into nature. And I grew up in the 70s, y'all. That was a different time. And I love that I was able to grow up in the 70s because we were outside all the time. We weren't inside. We weren't in front of a TV. We weren't in front of a computer screen. So I'm thankful for that. But I also am very passionate about helping our students figure out how they can disconnect from technology. Yes, it's great. It has all its advantages, but can we get them outside and get them into an environment where they can learn in other places like Scouts? I was a big volunteer in Scouts for over a decade. And so your story resonates with me for sure. So those all, I think, shaped the way I look at how we need to create career awareness and educational pathways for students. And just that awareness early, young students need to know that nuclear energy can be a very sustainable pathway of energy, and that we can conserve our environment through that. We don't have to use all fossil fuels. We can have a mix of things, and it'll work out to our advantage if we get in early, and then it'll pay off in the end because it's a cheaper source of energy later down the road. After
I want to turn next to and Mike, I'll probably start with you here. Looking at the intersection of environmental stewardship and our state's economy. Your work, really each of your work, sits at the heart of our state's economic success, and it can't be separated, I think in particular, from the health of the natural resources in our state. And again, Mike, we'll start with you. Can you maybe share a specific moment or project that illustrates how your industry's success, conservation, the work that you're doing in particular, depends on or intersects with environmental stewardship? What does that
and just to kind of frame that up, we were talking a little bit ago about the fact that there is no industry, there's no person in this room that is here outside of being born that doesn't rely on a natural resource in every aspect of your life. You cannot escape it. We don't live in a vacuum. We don't live in steel homes. I mean, steel comes from non-renewable resources. Timber frame comes from renewable resources, things like that. So when you start looking at how natural resources impact the economy, it's a vast area, obviously. Now, just in the outdoor recreation world, to put some numbers to it, TVA estimates the TVA system of lakes is about $100 million in annual GDP impact to the state of Tennessee. The impact on hunting and fishing just by itself has been estimated anywhere from $44 to $60 billion, depending on who you talk to. And so it's real money, and it's a large part of it is based on renewable resources, which is really kind of interesting because, sustainability has been around now for 20 years. But the first, and I tell Dodd Galbraith, my buddy at Lipscomb, all the time, foresters were the original sustainable practice people. From Sweden and Germany. They developed it. And I'd point out, what we have today in Tennessee is unique. We're very fortunate that we have a lot of natural resources that are in the shape they are in, and that's not by chance. That was very purposeful by people that put into practice things 50, 60 years ago that we're now benefiting from. But to get to the specific answer and an example of your question, we've been doing a lot of work in West Tennessee, which is I would argue, the most altered landscape in our state. How many of y'all know what the word channelization means when they do that to a stream or a river where they straighten it out and they take it out of its meanders? Well, that was done starting in the 20s and 30s. And the whole concept of channelization was to move the water out and not create as much flooding. What we know now, 80, 100 years later, is it has the opposite effect. It actually makes flooding worse. It raises the intensity of floods. It raises the frequency of flooding. And in bad situations, it kills people when you have floods. And so one of the things that we work with, and right now we have a project outside of Jackson, Tennessee, my hometown, on the South Fork Forked-Ear River, where we are purposefully restoring a section of the main stem of the river in an area to slow the water down through that section. And that does a few things. The river is not the channel. It's roughly the annual floodplain. And so when you slow the water down there, it does several things that are economically really important. One, it gives water a place to go. And when you give water a place to go, it doesn't end up in somebody's basement or in their first floor of their house, like we saw in Nashville in 2011. The second thing it does is when you slow water down, it recharges groundwater. And you might think, well, why is that important? That's what keeps streams flowing when it's not raining. When you go through drought, when you go through periods where you don't have as much water, it's the hydrological cycle is what we call it, the scientists call it. But that groundwater recharge is important for two reasons. One, it keeps that base flow in these rivers. And you're thinking, well, why is that important? Well, it's great for fish. It's great if you want to go paddle, but there's some other really important things it does. It recharges the aquifer in West Tennessee, which is the best quality aquifer arguably in the United States, especially for drinking water, which is the entire hub of the economy in Memphis. The second thing it does is it provides the ability for us to take our treated wastewater and give it a place to go. And there's a famous story that I'll share as I kind of wrap this up. In my hometown, there was a new wastewater facility built on the north side of town. And it deposited its outfall pipe into a place called Moisey Creek, which I grew up across the street from. And Moisey Creek is a channelized creek. And that floodplain developed to the point where the base flow was lost. It would go dry, completely dry during the year. Well, when it happened, the city had to stop using Moisey Creek as its outfall pipe for that facility, and it had to build all new infrastructure to move it all the way across town, several miles, to the big facility and dump it into the South Fork. Now, the South Fork Forked-Ear River has no more capacity to take on treated wastewater. So guess what? Industry's not going to be able to get a permit to put a pipe in Jackson without coming up with a way to reduce that pollution impact, right? So when we slow down water, we recharge the groundwater, we do all those things, that hydrological cycle keeps everything moving in the right direction, and it gives that capacity for the utility department to be able to take care of your wastewater.
I'm never going to think about rivers in West Tennessee the same way again now that I've heard that story. Chelsea, I want to ask you the same question. I think this question is maybe obvious as we think about FFA, right? FFA doesn't happen without the natural resources of our state, but talk about maybe or share an example or two of how these two things are sort of intersect in the work that you do every day.
So I think when I'm looking at the intersection, I'm partially thinking about how those students are remaining in their communities or coming back to their communities and having successful careers and the opportunity for successful careers. So one of the big kind of statistics that I think about that Tennessee Farm Bureau put out in this last year is that we lose about 10 acres of agricultural farmland an hour in Tennessee. So since we've been here this morning, we are 30 plus acres down, and that farmland is being transitioned into another type of property, right? It's leaving the agricultural zoning and becoming something else, whether that's a facility or just something different. And so when I think about the students returning and wanting to be involved in production agriculture, stewarding that land, right? We in these agricultural education courses are teaching leadership. We are talking about the potential for premier leadership, personal growth, and career success through agricultural education. But we are also providing students with the education and resources to return to the agricultural industry if that's their choice. And so when we talk about stewarding those resources, these students are going through lessons about soil erosion, right? When they become producers, they are changing hats. Farmers are meteorologists, they are agronomists, they are business owners, and they're having to make really difficult choices very early in their career. And a good example of a situation from weather extremes that I think we could talk about is West Tennessee last year. So West Tennessee last year was unseasonably hot, and it got hot really quickly, and row crops are a big commodity in West Tennessee. So when you think about corn, if it dries out too quickly and you lose moisture too quickly, you're losing value for what you can harvest that corn at. And when commodity prices are already low, that's a very delicate balance. So last year, unlike many years in history, these farmers in West Tennessee had to choose to chop silage. So they're cutting that corn with a higher moisture content so that they can feed it to their livestock or sell it to be fed to livestock. Not as profitable as selling it for its original intent. And so these are the lessons that we are instilling in our students, and we're trying to provide tangible, real life examples of those decisions that they'll have to make. And we have, 34,000 FFA members in Tennessee, a little over 260 agricultural educators. So preparing those educators with those lessons plans, with those resources. And finally, an example of how those students get involved is they take those supervised agricultural experiences. Carly Dunn from Stewart's Creek in Smyrna partnered with a local producer and tested hydroponically grown fodder and mold-resistant practices to then feed that fodder to livestock. So the farmer came to her and said, I'm doing the hydroponic system, I'm having a lot of mold, can you help run some scenarios? And so Carly, a junior in high school, was able to run that research, presented at the national level, and was awarded as a national proficiency winner. So just trying to segment how those students can take that education, return to the industry, return to their communities, and make it economically viable.
That's great. Thank you for those stories and examples too. Really, really fantastic. All right, our last question, and Michelle, I want to start with you on this one because I know this is your passion area in particular, is really how you see your industry, and I'll ask this to each of you, but your industry creating new and meaningful opportunities for students in particular, especially as sustainability becomes more central to the economy and to Tennessee's future. And would love for you to share an example of how your work in particular is helping students gain some of the skills, experiences, and mindsets needed for these emerging roles. And I would just say, and Senator Frist mentioned this earlier, at SCORE, we're really kind of obsessed right now with better connecting education to employment and helping students get on pathways that will lead to economic mobility and economic independence. And we know that careers in fields related to sustainability are often those kinds of jobs, right, that are going to lead to long-term sustainability and economic independence. So anyway, Michelle, would love for you to start and share your reflections on this. I know this is a passion area for you.
It is, and I could talk all day about it, and I won't, but you can come to me afterwards. So I think there are a couple different things that I'd like to hit on. One is we're really all about partnerships. So I manage the Partnership for Nuclear Energy, which is a consortia of over 350 individuals representing over 140 educational institutions and industry and government officials coming together to create an opportunity to solve the nation's problem, if you will, with the supply and demand of workforce for the nuclear industry specifically. So we've created an academic roadmap. This is a recommendation list, if you will, for K through 12, all the way through professional development. And these recommendations are going to be given feet, if you will, to get those implemented by having implementation teams. So we're getting ready to roll out that full document next week at the NECX conference. So if anybody's going to Atlanta, welcome, and I'll talk to you about it there. But basically, that is going to give us the education and training plans that we need to be able to educate and create opportunities for these students. And it has recommendations everywhere from we need to create awareness with students at young ages all the way to we need to educate our teachers on how to teach K through 12 curriculum or how to encourage students to take the trades pathway as opposed to taking a 4-year degree college program when they're not bent for that. Not everybody needs to go to a 4-year institution. They can become a trades person and find a wonderful career path there, but they don't know that that's available to them necessarily, and finding those correct resources to enable that. And so it's all about the partnerships and creating those relationships with schools and funding resources to maximize what we're doing. We're trying to optimize the way we go about implementing education now. We're trying to accelerate it. We need to get a pathway that's more streamlined and get people to the jobs faster. We sometimes spin our wheels in creating programs that don't add value. And then the next person beside us is doing the exact same thing. And we have no accountability for that because we're not talking to each other. And then we waste resources and time and energy. So we don't want to be redundant. So we need to talk to each other and collaborate. I think we heard that collaboration point earlier today, but it's all about maximizing effort in a concerted way so that we don't lose out on opportunities to solve the problem together. There are gaps in our education and training systems, and we know that we've identified some of those, and it takes all of us working together to do that. And I think that once we do that, this next generation of workers, Gen Z, who wants to be mission focused, they want to have sustainable solutions, they want to have job stability, we can solve that problem for them. But they don't know it even exists because we haven't had a concerted effort to tell them about it. So I would encourage you, if you have any inkling toward engaging in nuclear energy education or training, join us on that pathway and helping us to make that a reality, because it's a worthwhile endeavor. We know that that is a sustainable energy source, and we need workers. Numbers are looking like we need 300,000 new employees by 2050. And that is just our industry, not all the adjacent industries that we'll be pulling from if we don't create our own. We can't just keep pulling from other areas, or then another industry will suffer, right? So those are some of the things we're doing.
Great. Mike, love to ask you this same question. I know, and our team has had the pleasure of working with your team a bit more recently on creating opportunities and pathways for students in some of these career fields. We'd love for you to talk about how you all are thinking about work in that space. And I would just ask, don't keep your light hid under a bushel on this. I know you all are doing a lot. And so share a couple of examples about what you're doing.
Well, so yeah, there's 2 or 3 that I can go through pretty quickly. One is we have a significant set of outreach programs, and we're purposefully trying to train the next generation of people that play in the outdoors to maintain that economic benefit that requires the sustainable natural resource base. Because there's an old saying, you're not going to protect what you don't value. You're not going to value what you don't understand. And you're not going to understand what you don't study. And you're not going to study what somebody doesn't help you learn. And so if we can link all that back together, then you've got to have a group of people like are in this room that actually care. And you have to be purposeful about developing that group to maintain it. The other one is, before Richard Louv, before STEM, before Common Core, our organization in the 1980s developed a program called Conservation Education Now for Tennessee Students. It was exceptionally successful. It was integrated into state government. Then it was subsequently cut by state government, and it's on the cutting room floor even today. A huge loss, in our opinion, but and that all happened between 1980 and 1998. We're now working with your team to look at how can we bring back some semblance of a conservation education elective at the high school level. And our team, Horace Hipton here, who's our director of policy, is leading that effort, working with your folks. And we hope to have something where we take the politically likable, like hunter education, and kind of wrap it with a lot of really good conservation education information. So politically it's palatable, and then it's also very effective moving forward. The last one I would say is this, we've had the privilege of working with Governor Lee's staff, and he put out a tremendous Executive Order 108 on the Duck River, and Senator Frist mentioned that before. Most of the rivers outside of the Cumberland River in Middle Tennessee are low flow rivers. And when you have a long-term economic development plan to use that river and the Duck for water supply, and it feeding 250,000 people now, that's a failed economic development strategy. So the governor, through his leadership, has put out a call towards looking at regionalized water supply planning. And I think that's a real interesting model. I bring that up not just because it may solve that problem, but it could be a new model for the state to look at across the state as we start dealing with water scarcity.
Right.
In a state that's been relatively very rich with water.
Yeah. All right, Chelsea, close us out. Give us some examples of how the work that you're doing at FFA is helping students build the skills and knowledge to be successful on pathways in these fields that we know connect to environmental stewardship.
So I'll try to paint a picture here, but when a student gets that supervised agricultural experience, right, and they can change it 4 or 5 times from when they first pick it up because they're still figuring out what exactly it means to them. There are several different pathways that can go down, and that can also dictate which courses they would want to take in their ag education career. So agricultural mechanics and technology, precision agriculture, plant science, animal science, social systems, environmental systems. These are titles of agri-science fair categories. And then we have proficiency awards where students are individually recognized for those projects. And that incorporates wildlife management, that incorporates outdoor recreation, service learning, where students go on to create playgrounds in their community, get grants for playgrounds so that younger children can spend time outside. So I guess what I just want to say about those pathways is that they can be so wide-reaching. And the answer to all of it is our partners. Tennessee Wildlife Federation is represented at our state convention each year. We have a robust expo that students can walk through while they're in Gatlinburg, and we see a little over 7,000 visitors in a 3 to 4 day span. And we're trying to give more and more opportunity to universities, TCAT, to the iron workers, to career pathways that are out there and available for students. And we want them to see that. We want them to consider a project in that area, and we want them to continue to develop and grow down that pathway. So I would just close out my portion by saying that, you know, agriculture touches all of our lives. And in the same way, we want to make sure that our students are world ready and that these pathways lead them to successful careers, no matter which direction they choose to go.
Great. So I think this conversation reminds us that the future of our state, I think, depends on leaders in particular who understand the connection between our environment and natural resources, our economy and economic success, and our students. And just grateful for the insights that you each have shared about how those things connect and the work that you're doing every day to make that happen. Will you all join me in thanking our amazing panelists? Okay, and I want to transition to now our last panel of the day and invite my colleague, Aleah Guthrie, who is SCORE's Vice President of Policy and Government Relations, to the stage to lead that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, David. And as our final panel gets set, I am just reflecting on how the topics discussed today really touch so many facets of our life. And I think these issues can often be reduced to partisan debate, but I'm just really struck by the experiences that have been shared and really the interdisciplinary and cross-sector solutions that we've learned about today. I feel as though the blend of all of these different perspectives can give us some next steps and path forward. So please join me in welcoming our panelists, and we're going to talk about the role that leaders can and already are playing in Tennessee. So first, I'll introduce Laurel Creech, who is the Tennessee State Director for the Nature Conservancy. And then we have Bryan Kerns, who is a fire science teacher at Dobyns-Bennett High School and was also the 24-25 Tennessee Teacher of the Year. And yeah. And Dalya Qualls-White, who is the Senior Vice President and Chief Communications Officer at BlueCross BlueShield of Tennessee. So thank you all for being here with us today for this conversation. If we could just go through and each of you introduce yourself further, but also share how does your work connect student experience, sustainability, and really community well-being, and why do you think this work is important for Tennessee? We'll start with you, Laurel.
Okay. Hi. Good afternoon. It is such a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me. So many wonderful faces in the room, and certainly this event is truly connecting the dots. So I'm Laurel Creech. I grew up in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and I don't have any siblings, and so nature was my family. And that was where I went to go play and be and learn who I am as a person. And as I think about my future, I don't have any kids, and so I'm leaving all that I have to nature, including my body, to Larkspur Natural Burial Ground as well. But because of that, I have a deep sense of responsibility, love, passion, and really a drive to protect nature. And so that has been really the seed underneath my career. And to do that, it's not just about me, it's about everybody around me and all of our community to help do that as well. So I'm at the Nature Conservancy. You've heard some of my wonderful, amazing leader and peers at the Nature Conservancy talk about our work. And we are really driving at our interconnected crises of climate change and biodiversity loss. And so that is all ages. And so what we do is working together and collaboratively with many different cross-sector agencies, organizations such as Mike Butler from TWF, such as BlueCross, BlueShield, such as our teachers in education, and all the different speakers you've heard of, because it takes the collective whole to make a difference. So thank you.
Yeah, I'm Bryan Kerns. I teach at Dobyns-Bennett High School up in the Upper East Tennessee in Kingsport. I'm a recovering math teacher. I taught math for 17 years, and I was a wildland firefighter on the side. And as I taught math, I have these down and outers come into my classroom, and I try to get them and inspire them and get them off the pathway that their parents took or what may be expected of them. But then it kind of ended. It kind of fizzled. Like, you passed Algebra 2. Now go and get your little piece of paper. And that's where it stopped. And so I started a club in wildland fire. And I thought, I'll teach teenagers to set things on fire. And then that didn't sound very good. But I said, I want to give kids something that they can start Monday after graduation. That's purposeful, that connects them back to the earth, because I see a lot of sad things in my classroom. And I truly believe that a lot of those things can be maybe not fixed, but can be navigable with a connection to the earth. And so when I get kids whose parents are strung out on the couch at home, and I get up on Base Mountain, and I say, this is all that matters right now. And you're part of this mountain, and you can affect this mountain for your grandkids. Man, you talk about empowering kids who've never been empowered before. And it doesn't matter what their parents are doing. It doesn't matter what color they are, or how much money their parents had, or if they failed Algebra 2 for 3 or 4 times, which some of them do. All that matters is you're willing to connect back to this earth and be a steward of this thing that's far more important than anything that's happened to you so far.
Thank you.
And good afternoon, everybody. I am Dalya Qualls White, Senior Vice President and Chief Communications Officer at BlueCross BlueShield of Tennessee, and also the Executive Director of our foundation. I loved all of today's panels. I especially loved the last panel on storytelling, because that is part of what I do at BlueCross. And, I like to say that we also help build trust through communication with our employees, with members, with providers, and with community leaders. like yourselves that are here today. So that's part of and we help, Tennesseans understand how Blue Cross is working on their behalf, on your behalf. And on the foundation side, we help to connect communities with resources for health and well-being, which I'll talk a little bit about later with our Blue Cross Healthy Places. But Tennesseans, citizens across the country are facing serious challenges, with rising medical costs and growing chronic needs and growing mental health needs as well. So, I think it's very important, it's critically important to help support those efforts through things like Blue Cross Healthy Places and getting outside. I've heard that several times today. So I think this conversation is important to align health, align sustainability, align education to help support those student needs and, all of the health needs that, many of us are facing.
Thank you, each of you. Laurel, you sit at the intersection of research and policy, but also you talked about how this work is personal. I'd love to hear maybe an example you have of a cross-sector collaboration that has worked and why you think it worked. What were those ingredients that we could replicate?
Sure. Thank you for that. So I would say there's so many different examples. On my work, I started in the private sector, running Team Green Adventures through media, getting people outdoors, to working in the public sector under Carl Dean's administration and running sustainability and climate work for the city of Nashville, and now at the Nature Conservancy. And there's so many amazing examples that have been successful over those years and have sustained that. And I will use an example that is actually active right now, and that's the Tennessee Outdoor Partnership, which Governor Lee has put together a cross-coordinated group of individuals and leaders in state agencies, nonprofit sector, as well as government sector and institutions. And that effort is to elevate the value and importance of outdoors. And one of the things to me and why I value nature is because of that outdoor activity and getting outside and exploring things and having that value of why that's so important. The Governor Lee's Tennessee Outdoor Partnership was created just a few years ago, and it is continuing to make significant investments through cross-coordination and collaboration with multiple different agencies. And that right now we're starting to work on what that's going to look like after this administration so that it can sustain itself and continue to elevate the importance of outdoor conservation and outdoor recreation together, because they can come together and they should come together. And that's the real thing when I think about me as in growing up and what nature was so important to me. It was the outdoor aspect, because I grew up in a very healthy community. My dad had diabetes type 1, and so he was able to he thought about exercise as being a way that he doesn't need insulin. He can go out and exercise and really be healthy and fit. And so for me, outdoor rec was important for me. And that's how I got connected and appreciated to nature. And I feel like that's sort of an entryway for many people, especially youth, is those experiences. And so I would say the Tennessee Outdoor Partnership is probably one of the most relevant active element. And it's really all of us as constituents to continue to elevate the importance of that Tennessee Outdoor Partnership and outdoor rec and conservation to keep it going.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I feel like that's such a great segue. I wanted to ask you to share a little bit more about Blue Cross Healthy Place program and such a powerful example of how the private sector can invest in healthier communities. And you talked about the importance of building trust. So I'd love to, hear from leading this work. What is the role that business can play in shaping healthier communities and physical space that supports that?
Absolutely. So the Blue Cross Healthy Place program is the signature cause of our foundation. It launched in 2018 with the idea to create spaces for community connection, for physical well-being, and it's available for all ages and all abilities. We have currently invested more than $70 million across the state with 23 projects and 5 ongoing right now. So really excited about that. We have a Blue Cross Healthy Place here in Nashville at the Northwest YMCA. And we are about to announce a new, we are about to have a grand opening, excuse me, for one at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, which we're really excited about. So it doesn't always have to be about play spaces, but about where people can gather, where people can get, you know, together and connect with one another. And reflect and things like that. So I think in terms of businesses and how businesses can partner and invest in, you know, ideas like that is to listen first, to listen to what the community needs are. We see that every year in our Blue Cross Healthy Places application process. One example is the town of Irwin in Northeast Tennessee, which was devastated by Hurricane Helene a year ago. They applied for a Blue Cross Healthy Place grant, and we were able to support that initiative. So we're really excited about that in terms of, you know, how an event like that and the environmental impact that it made in that community and, you know, the needs that they have, and we're able to support that. So I would say to listen. Another thing I would say is to commit for the long term. One of the great things about the Blue Cross Healthy Place program is that we also provide a maintenance fund for these communities. And, you know, that gives them the opportunity to, you know, fix things that are broken and not be burdened by the cost, which, you know, are usually with local governments that, you know, don't have those type of means. So we're able to support a maintenance fund through this program as well. So listen, you know, be in it for the long run, and align your giving with your mission. For us, you know, as a health plan, well-being is part of that. So I think it connects and aligns nicely.
Yeah, amazing. And love these examples of collaboration and the importance of collaboration, whether it's conservation or corporate investment. And we like collaboration at SCORE. It's in our name. And we definitely see the power of partnership in creating opportunities for students and workforce development. So Bryan, I'd love to hear you talk about you know, how this changing environment is impacting the job landscape that students are walking into on the Monday after high school graduation. So your work with students is such a great opportunity for them, but it's also an example of kind of career exposure. So I'd love to hear, what was your process of starting this student-led prescribed burns unit initially, and what impact are you seeing it have for students and kind of thinking about their own futures?
Yeah, so it is very unique for somebody to take teenagers out in the wood and say, hey, set that on fire and nobody go to jail. It's pretty cool. But so I have that advantage of, hey, we get to burn things. But then that's kind of the carrot to get them in and then say, you know, we're burning this for a reason. And so then you start to have those conversations of prescribed fire, fire ecology, forest resilience, native species resilience, native grassland restoration. And then these guys and gals get to go rub shoulders with these professional fire practitioners and foresters and land managers. And they go, could I like take your job someday? Like, could I be you? And they don't say that, but they ask me, could I be him? Absolutely, you can be him. And so, you know, fire is just kind of the cool hook to get them into thinking, okay, wait, how does this whole thing work together? You know, fire was here for thousands of years, and we brilliantly took it out of the system because, like, we should take gravity out because my kid falls down too much. But so to get them to thinking about this global, or even just in their holler they live in Appalachia, like there's more to it than just us there. And so, and then thinking there's a whole lot going on here, and there's a whole lot of people that care about what goes on here and study what goes on here and put, you know, all these studies into practice that goes on here. And these could be careers. Can you imagine getting to come out here and do this and get paid for it? And so that's pretty neat to give them. Again, I have that flashy hook of fire, but at the same time, It's all about stewardship. And it just happens to be a fun way of stewardship for teenagers to get to do. And so starting it as you know, a prescribed burn team in high school, getting kids out, we actually conduct burns. We used to be a resource for Tennessee Valley Authority, and we would help those folks. But then we started to do our own burns. We've almost become a community resource for prescribed burning, controlled burns. Farmers call and say, hey, I don't want to cut this field for hay anymore, but I want to be a good steward of this 10 acres. What can I do? And say, well, we can burn it and we can restore, you know, some native grasslands and pollinators and see some cool stuff coming up. And so for students to hear me say that and to think, hey, I could do this for a career, it's meaningful. And it also, I'm going to go way too long here. It also connects them back to the earth, which for me is maybe the biggest sad part of young people today, is not being connected to the earth on which they live. It's hard to know who you are if you don't know where you are. And so I love to talk about that with kids too. Like, you're in Appalachia, you're in the Appalachian Mountain Range. Here's what's cool about this place. Now, let's see how you fit into this, because you are a steward of this place now. And so whether they make a career or not out of this, they are now more informed voters and citizens and parents and spouses and all those cool things.
Yeah, I appreciate you talking about the sort of character, the ways that it adds to us to have that sense of place. I think that was true for me. And so I'm just so thankful you're doing that with students. And that they're getting to see those career opportunities. And I know that BlueCross BlueShield, you mentioned the sort of principles from the Healthy Place program of listen, be in it for the long term, align it to your mission. And I that makes me think about the Blue Sky Institute. And I think those same principles are likely true there. For folks who aren't aware, can you share a little bit about the Blue Sky Institute and why that was important and sort of what that collaboration looks like between education and industry?
Absolutely. So the Blue Sky Tennessee Institute is a program that we launched 3 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, as a way to solve a talent gap in technology jobs at Blue Cross. So we weren't getting enough entry-level candidates in technology, and when we were, it was taking too long to train them. So we thought, what is it that we could do to create a workforce development pipeline? And, you know, the first thing was finding a higher education partner who would be willing to, you know, try this, to do some things differently. And that partner was East Tennessee State University. And now we have the Blue Sky Tennessee Institute in partnership with East Tennessee State University. And it provides students an accelerated bachelor's degree. So they get a degree in 2 years with a guaranteed job at Blue Cross. We just graduated our first cohort last December. So we have 28 new employees that are working in our technology department. All of them went through the Blue Sky program, which is located on our campus in Chattanooga as well. So it's just a great partnership, another way to identify those workforce talent gaps and, you know, what you can do to partner with, you know, higher education institutions or workforce training programs and things like that to, you know, to solve for this problem.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yes, and I think that employer-led, purpose-built educational opportunity and sort of partnership to really build those workforce opportunities for students. Laurel, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about, you know, you've led sustainability efforts at both the city through Metro Nashville green infrastructure projects, as well as at the state level for the Nature Conservancy. And so how do you approach building trust and momentum across different sectors, and any wisdom for us on the environment and education and how those stakeholders, you know, maybe are fertile ground for collaboration and bipartisanship? So I'd love to hear sort of what your lessons have been from working at those different intersections.
Sure, thank you. So indeed, you had heard very much from a lot of speakers today about the power of trust and the speed of trust, and having common conversations with each other and listening and having a common thread through that. And as you heard from Senator Frist at the opening segment, that nature is nonpartisan and we all care greatly about it. It's all part of everything of who we are and how we survive. And so if you come to a common agreement about something that resonates with individuals, no matter what side they're on, then it's much easier to come together and identify a solution and work together on that solution. Sometimes that takes a lot of negotiating. Sometimes it takes a lot of patience. Thinking about a most recent legislative action that many different partners worked together on, a coalition led by the Tennessee Wildlife Federation around wetlands and the importance of our wetlands. That was an exact example of pulling together very, very, very different sides and those that were really almost polar opposites, and having to negotiate and bring them to a common ground to move forward. Now, when that happens, not everybody gets everything, right? That's what the power of negotiation is. So you've got to give a little to get some. And where we landed with wetlands, even though it wasn't perfect, could have been a lot worse. And so that is a true example of how coming together on something and being willing to listen, have patience, be willing to give a little bit, and come together so you can rise up and then hopefully have something that is sustainable and agreeable to move forward on and continue to rise the bar together in that aspect. So I would say that was a great example of that and can resonate in so many different aspects of collaborating with multiple sectors.
Thank you. And it makes me think about what policy opportunities we have. And so Bryan, as a teacher and as the Tennessee Teacher of the Year, your classroom experience, what are the barriers or maybe supports that are needed to ensure more students have that type of opportunity that your students are able to get? What can we be doing to make this more of the norm across our state, so that we can negotiate and get that, what are the things that we should be taking action on for students?
Yeah, I loved Jay's model this morning, and I loved his list up there. And that list, I kind of teared up at it because when I read those things, I had these smells and sounds and feelings pop up into my head, and I thought, what if kid didn't get that, And I have a lot of kids that don't get that in my classroom. They've never stood in a creek, and they've never climbed and heard a pine tree with the wind blowing through it or smelled it. And it's just like, man, those are like parts of me. That's who I am. And it built me, and it probably built most of you all, because you wouldn't be in here with this concern if you weren't built by those things. And so I loved his word risky. And so I think we need to be a little more risky. I mean, heck, I take teenagers out and set hillsides on fire. So if I can do that, surely we can do things less risky than that, right? So I love that word risky, Jay. And I think maybe let's let kids be risky. And one of the greatest things we've ever done in education in Tennessee is we took cell phones out of schools this year. Because, yes, it's huge. It's huge. Because I thought, we have fences around our schools to protect them from predators, but we let thousands of predators in our schools every day electronically. And so, man, it has changed kids. And so now we've kind of got kids off those. Maybe maybe they've looked up now. And now let's grab them and say, hey, now let's come out to this place called outside. And then you can breathe and look around and maybe take a risk and go touch that tree. So I think maybe let's get a little more risky when we ask for permission on things, and be bold. Because the first time I talked about this, I'm a math teacher, and they knew I was a little crazy anyway. But I was like, can I burn a little 10 by 10 square at the track? And they were like, what are you talking about? Burning a square of grass at the track. And I was like, well, I want to demonstrate a drip torch and put fire on the ground. And they were like, I don't know, Kerns. I asked the fire marshal. And so it was almost like everybody, they put barriers up, but barriers became opportunities to not only say, hey, here's something I want to do, but then when you find the right person who says, that's awesome, go for it. And our fire marshal happened to be a wildland firefighter. That's where he started. And he said, burn the whole hill, Kerns. It's like, yes, sir. So now I've divided that hillside into 6 burn units, and it's a fire ecology research area. And we go out there, and my students burn one unit in the spring and 1 unit in the fall. And I take 600 biology students out there and say, look at these differences. That flower's there and it's not here because we burned that in the fall, not the spring. I mean, so that's burning part of the campus in a city school, is now affecting 600 to 800 biology kids every semester. And who knows how many careers are coming out of that, or maybe all that. So I think that's my message as teacher of the year, whatever I am, is just be risky, because kids deserve the opportunities we had. They deserve that.
Yeah, amazing. And I love that charge to be risky in whatever the arena that is for you, whether it's by creating a partnership with someone who you haven't worked with before, or taking a risk to advocate for a policy that you believe in, or investing in something that is aligned to your mission as a corporation. So whatever arena we have, how can we take those risks? So just really appreciate that. And so many amazing examples and reflections that I've got. I want to close this out with 2 questions for each of you. So we'll just go down the line. And my 2 questions are, looking ahead to the next 5, 10 years, what is your vision for sustainability and student success in Tennessee? And then what is one tangible action? We've got a lot of expertise in the room and a lot of interest. I'm like, they're still here at the final panel. So what is one action that each of us could take to help move Tennessee towards that vision? Sorry.
So I'll say, in terms of vision for us at Blue Cross, the vision for Tennessee is that people can afford the care that they need, that, all of our citizens will go to the place called outside and, have a welcome public space where they can get, physical activity, community connection, and a place where education sparks innovation and career readiness with things like the Blue Sky Institute. And, we hope that people, other businesses can adapt and grow that model. I neglected to mention earlier that we are starting another career readiness program with customer service agents, and they will get, a full-time job and be able to get their associate's degree on day 1. So that's called Blue Horizon. We've got a thing with Blue. So so be looking out for that one as well. But in terms of what people can do, volunteer, join a board, again, get outside, take a walk, pick a worthy cause. There are millions of ways that we can get involved. And, if we all do one thing, what an impact we would have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Very good. I think, what was the first part of that question?
What is your vision?
A vision.
10 years from now.
So I have all these visions of me personally, like what's the next step. I would love to see, I get to reach, I had 430 students sign up to take my class this year. It's the most requested elective in the school. And I only get to reach 150 of them because I get 25 per class, 3 classes a semester. So my old math skills came back correctly. It's 150. And so there's, however many left out that don't get it. And what if those are seniors? And so I have so many kids who, graduate. And I have a kid right now on the Payson Hot Shots in Arizona. He's one of my graduates. And he's like, Kerns, He called me the other day from the Grand Canyon. He's sleeping on the edge of the Grand Canyon. Grand Canyon's on fire, but he's sleeping on the edge of the Grand Canyon. He's like, Kerns, if you would have told me 2 or 3 years ago that I'd be sleeping on the edge of the Grand Canyon, fighting fire, making good money, traveling the West, loving every second of this, he said, I thought you were crazy. Because you know how I met that kid? I met that kid because he failed Algebra 1. And that's what it took for him to get put in my repeat Algebra 1 class, for me to expose him to a career in wildland fire. So a kid had to fail Algebra 1 to be sleeping on the Grand Canyon and putting fire out for our nation as a hotshot. That shouldn't be the path, right? Like, it should be much clearer than that. So my vision is for it to be much clearer than that, because unfortunately, unless you go to Dobyns-Bennett High School in Kingsport, Tennessee, nobody else knows how to tell you to get a career in wildland fire, unfortunately. Because as a math teacher, I would have kids say, hey, how could I get a career in that wildland fire stuff you talk about you doing on the side? And I'm like, oh, well, Google the Cherokee National Forest phone number and just give them a call and go from there. Yeah, right. That'll never happen. And so that got me thinking, I gotta give these kids a clear pathway if they want to do this. And so that's what started the club and eventually the class and eventually the program. But I would love to see that spread at least across East Tennessee, or maybe the state, or maybe the Southeast, or maybe the nation, who knows? And I would love to be a part of that. And so I would love to see what I'm doing in my center block classroom up there in Northeast Tennessee. I'd love to see that expand, because there's hundreds, if not thousands, of kids that fire could open up a career, maybe in fire, or maybe a career in natural resources, or just a reason to come to school tomorrow. And so that's my vision for that. And then what can you do to help? I love your thing is, well, this afternoon, go outside and make sure you're still connected to what you believe in, and make sure you continue to have that passion, and it's not just a bottom line on a spreadsheet for some reason. And then if you see your neighbor kid, invite him or her to come outside and show him or her that, hey, this tree's supposed to be here and this one's not. It's Bradford pear, we should cut it down. And so yeah, just stewardship, not only in your profession, but in your personal life. And yeah, I like that, what you said. So, and then risky, Jay, I'll give you credit for that word, man. Risky. Don't think, well, it's never been done before, because no high school teacher ever took a drip torch out to the track and set it on fire and didn't go to jail. So go for it. That's what I would say.
Thank you. Well, that's awesome. And I love everything you just said, Bryan. I would say, and to add to what you just said, is that the Tennessee Nature Academy becomes the norm, not the rare. And that what Jay presented today is what is happening at every school across Tennessee and beyond. And teachers like you are in all of our schools across, ideally, the United States. But having that be the norm and us raising up our voice for that to be the norm, that is a risk. And that can become reality as a collective whole if we continue to push for that. And I would say, in terms of one thing, so for Tennessee, we are the most biodiverse inland state in the United States. So I'll say that again, we are the most biodiverse inland state in the United States. That is really, really special and very unique. And we have such beautiful, beautiful natural areas across our very diverse state. If you think about what Mike talked about in West Tennessee, the Mississippi River Basin, the agricultural land that you heard about the endemic species that are in the Hatchie and the Wolf, all the way to Middle Tennessee, and the amazing caves that we have. We have 11,000 caves in Tennessee, a huge bat population. And then you head out to the Appalachians, which is one of the most biodiverse wildlife corridors in the world, here in Tennessee. So get outside. Experience that. Go see the purple martins. We have 100,000 purple martins that are roosting downtown right now, downtown in front of the convention center. Go out there, bring your kids, bring your students, bring friends and bring your family. Experience that, because that's the lasting impact and the ongoing responsibility that we have as human beings to our natural resources. Thank you.
Thank you so much to each of you. And I feel like the sort of the encouragement and the example that you're setting to listen and build trust, to take risks, to work together. I'm very encouraged that we have the vision and expertise in this room to make this true for Tennessee. We can have student success and sustainability. So please join me in thanking this panel as we invite Senator Frist to the stage.
Connecting the dots, and I'll just spend a few minutes here closing up, but this whole imagery of taking dots and connecting them is one I think is really appropriate for today. We've introduced you to hopefully some new dots, these experts who are spending their lives in many ways addressing a sphere, not the complete picture, but a part of the portrait. And those are the dots. And the only way really to do it is to bring together a group like this. And Zoom works well for most things, but where you're really pulling together the dots to paint a portrait on really a canvas that started as a white canvas just 4 hours ago. Connecting the dots is the best image, pulling it together, letting it integrate, letting it flow, coming in. For me, it does come back as I think about it. And as you heard from many of the speakers, we're at a point in time, we know what the trajectory is. We are the experts educating all of us are best to tell us where we are today. Then what's incumbent upon us is to take this connection of the dots, the new portrait or the beginning of the new portrait, and then taking it forward. And that's a huge responsibility. I do it in many ways, like you do. You think about your kids. And if you don't have kids, you think about young people generally. As I mentioned this morning, I've got 9 grandchildren from 6 to 11 or 12 years of age. And truthfully, I won't see, if we say success K through 12, and they're right in the K through 12, is going to be this life of being, whether it's career ready or ready for the workplace or a more fulfilling life. In truth, I won't discuss my age. I won't see that ever myself. I won't see most of it because of their age. It's kind of sad, that sort of thing. But what I do know is that now, and kind of with this information, that we have the opportunity together to best optimize, not put off. These problems don't matter. They're too slow. They go with time. These are real problems today. And we do know that the foundation for that life is set in those years K through 12. And we do know that the majority of our kids' life is in a school setting. And we know it is not ideal when it comes to safety or security or health or comfort or clean, all these basic things, which if we can optimize, which we can and we should, means in these foundational years, they are going to have the chance to have a more successful life coming in. And it's kind of that simple, but that's the call to action that I see as we go forward. I sort of take some notes, but you don't have to take notes because we've recorded all of this stuff. And thank goodness we did, because I started filling up one of these cards and then another card. And then I, pulled out my iPhone and started tapping things along. But we've recorded everything. We'll make those recordings available to you. We do encourage you to use social media appropriately where you can and to kind of spread the word. Not sort of necessarily about you or what you're thinking, but really to gather more information as we come forward. Let me see, from a housekeeping standpoint, let me just run through a couple of the things. We will make some summaries of takeaways to report out in a few weeks. We'll get that to you. Won't be complete, but sort of the high points coming in as well. Really more of as a reminder of what we talked about today, so we can continue to set the dots as connecting the dots as we go forward. And we'll put the data in there, that some of the insights and the ideas that were discussed today. Up on the screen here right this second, and you can go ahead and use your iPhone if you want. There's a QR code, and we'll give this QR code to you later as well. But we'd love for you to take a minute or so to fill out the survey and tell us what was most helpful to you today. We will continue to do connecting the dots. The kind of feedback, too long, short things, should we shorten things up, more panels, that sort of thing coming in is really helpful to us. You'll also get a link to that survey in an email that will be in your inbox shortly, so you don't have to do it right this second as well. The recordings I mentioned of today, we'll be sharing those, so please be on the lookout for those and feel free to share them with your colleagues, people who couldn't be here, or pieces of them, or bits of them, just to refresh your memory. My notes, this is one of my many, and you kind of just look back over the course of the day. How much can you really get in 4 hours or less than 4 hours? And it's pretty cool. You know, whether it's Jonathan Klein, that seemed like a long time ago, that first, but the whole, modernization and strengthening of facilities, Taj coming in with the whole idea of the economics, throwing it in and concentrating on the private sector and the workforce. And Zemina talking about the words that we ended with, the collaboration and the nature-based solutions that are so inherent. Again, we came back to at the end of the day, the reaching kids nationally as well as globally through groups like the Nature Conservancy and others and other nonprofits. And the Spark sessions today with Grace, and really giving that student a voice. Why advocacy? What is this anxiety that's being felt today? What is our intergenerational responsibility? All of that captured by Grace. And of course, Jay with the Tennessee Nature Academy, people have referred to him again and again in terms of what you are doing really embodies so much of what we all need to do. Can't copy it, shouldn't copy it, but coming back to whether it's the slides and the list or reaching or getting out into nature as part of the educational process. David Jaffe, obviously the curriculum out there, part of one of our 3 pillars at SCORE are supporting teachers with everything that they need to carry out their capacity. So when it comes down to curricula for kids and to be able to lift them up again. Lisa Patel, Lisa's an all-star. First time to Nashville. It's going to be the first of many, many times because we're going to get you back here coming in. Lisa is the world expert in many ways of what the physician's, doctor's role is as we look at this changing climate, changing environment. She is the nation expert there. The storytelling, it's all about storytelling. Again, I don't need to go through everybody, but I think Chelsea, when it comes back to FFA and leadership, and what we're training for the future coming in, and Michelle, the whole education and the recruitment coming in, David and Mike Butler, of course, with the policy to take things to scale when we have good ideas, how we do that, how we come together, coming together. And of course, Bryan Kerns, he came back to the risk, but you do see why the Teacher of the Year was given to Bryan. And with that same message, he amplifies that message all across America and is still in that position representing us at the federal level throughout. Laurel with the Nature Conservancy, the nature-based solutions, so much of what we have coming back to what some of the answers are. I won't say most of the answers do come to having that intimacy with nature itself. And Dalya, pretty cool because we're talking about the success of the student and coming to career or ready for the world, which is what SCORE is about, and we're kind of all about there, but you really do link it with the sort of training programs out there and this whole career readiness and Blue Sky and the programs that you've mentioned. And those are just sort of the notes that stick out with me coming through and all part of connecting the dots. The next steps for all of us, pretty clear, but as I sat over here and I look around the room and see who is here, most of you are not in this kind of room together with this sort of people very much. And that diversity is exactly what gives the strength of the room itself. It's exactly what gives the strength of the room. So some of you will take this inspiration, and all of us, I guess, have to take that inspiration and turn it into some sort of action items that are out there before us. For some of us, it's going to be a commitment to learn more just because you came today. And you may not have had a lot of knowledge about it. You may have had some skepticism about the topic. For others of you who are doing it every day, you're well versed in the environment. You know what the science is. You know where the truth is behind the sort of trajectory of where we are today. Your call to action can be different. It might be to explore some of the intersections of where you are today, the way you've thought of things. Some of us will go back to our workplaces in a few hours or tomorrow where people aren't thinking about this, and our call to action there will be sharing 2 or 3 things that you learned today. But whatever your role is, I do hope that all of you will continue the action with a next step conversation. It all starts with conversations, raising this topic with your fellow leaders. With that, I'm bringing the day to a close. I think if we can ever help make connections, please reach out. I think, as I said, the opening analogy to me, and I don't know where it came from, I guess it's because of the Labor Day football games, was we kind of taken it from 0 to 10 yards. We got 90 yards to go. And it's going to be dependent upon all of us coming together, being as smart as we can to go those next 90 yards. With that, drive safely, Uber safely. Thank you for coming to Nashville. Lisa, you're coming back many times. Thank you. God bless.